Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on 10 ways to improve your processes with GoAnywhere Advanced Workflows. We will get started. So whether you're already using advanced workflows and looking to walk away with some tips and tricks, or aren't yet using the product but are interested to learn more, I hope you find today's presentation useful. Before we get started, just a quick couple of reminders for you. The event is scheduled for an hour. We are recording this event, and after the webinar is over, you'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to the recording and the slides as well, just in case you miss any parts or want to share it with a colleague. If you do have any questions throughout the event, please feel free to submit those through the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to answer them as they come up throughout the presentation, and we'll also have time at the end for questions as well. And lastly, at the end of the webinar, you'll see a survey pop up. It's just a couple quick questions. Please fill out that if you don't mind. Just give us a sense of what was helpful to you during the presentation, and you can also enter any questions that we weren't able to answer that you still have at that point. So, looking at our agenda for today, we'll do a quick introduction. We'll walk through the 10 ways to use advanced workflows. You'll see a live demo of advanced workflows in action, and then we'll have time at the end for questions, so pretty straightforward today. So let me introduce our presenter. So today, Dan Freeman is going to be sharing with us. Dan is a Senior Solutions Consultant at Help Systems for the GoAnywhere product line. Dan has spent the last 10 years of his career in various security roles, ranging from systems engineer to security officer. And as a CISSP, Dan has designed networks, systems, and procedures to ensure regulatory compliance using the NIST risk management framework and HIPAA standards. So Dan, thanks so much for being with us today, and I will let you take it from here.
All right, sounds good. First off, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
All right, great. All right, Brooks, thanks for the intro, and thanks to everybody in attendance today. Hopefully we can learn a little something and maybe have some fun along the way. All right, that second part might be a bit of a stretch, but in any case, when talking about advanced workflows in GoAnywhere, we're basically talking about automation. Now, what's the big deal with automation, you ask? Well, let's quickly converse about just a few of the many benefits of eliminating those manual processes from your organization. How about reduced costs? More and more computing resources and total cost of ownership of those resources is getting pretty low. The bulk of the costs remain with the operations staff, and sometimes as high as 70%. Time savings, which ties right into reduced costs, as we all know time is money. Now with automation provided by job scheduling and batch processing, we can eliminate the human linear performance issues, leading into improved operational efficiency or productivity. Now this blends in with that cost reduction as well. Efficiency is described as the extent to which time, effort, and cost is applied. And automation ensures processes run as designed while eliminating manual process errors and keeping true to your best practices. Now, avoiding human errors flows nicely into advantage reliability. I really hate using a quote from a previous webinar, but as Alexander Pope once said, to err is human. And we all know how users and customers, not to mention your boss, really hates it when business processes fail. Now, we could definitely sprinkle in governance here as well. Automation helps you get back to those reliable best practices, ensuring for a secure and inviting environment. Now, these are just a few of the advantages of what automation can do for you and your specific business processes. Today, we'll take a look at the broad spectrum of automation and apply it to manage file transfer and how GoAnywhere can help you attain the aforementioned benefits and much more through advanced workflows. So let's jump right in and take a peek at 10 of these advantages. But first, I kind of want to explain this slide here. Now, I realize this could be a bit of old school for some in attendance, but basically what you're looking at is a picture of a scene in I Love Lucy, where Lucy and Ursula are asked to wrap chocolates on the assembly line. Now, things do get a bit hectic when the chocolates are rolling in faster than they can keep up, and they start shoveling them in their mouths, hats, clothes, whatever, just so their boss doesn't see that they're not keeping up to business here. Yep. I know, that was a pretty cheesy and maybe a bit of a stretch to illustrate how automation can provide productive efficiency, reliability, and a lot of advantages over our human counterparts. That was about as far as my imagination took me on this one. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Point one, let's create projects with no programming skills. Now, I have to admit, this one hits home for me. having 15 years or so of system admin and security background, and no, I repeat, no programming experience, unless you count the C++ and COBOL classes I was required to take in college, I'm a perfect example of someone who can create effective projects leveraging the easy UI of the Project Designer window. With our drag and drop components, over 100 unique tasks for detailed and virtually limitless workflow possibilities, all this with absolutely no scripting needed. Thank goodness. Now this is, at a high level, and in some respects not giving it proper respect, your replacement for those traditional script files, although projects are much more flexible. And did I mention they're easy to create? Now this here in the little picture, the Project Designer window, don't fret, we'll go over that in the live demo, so we'll kind of go through how we can actually create these projects. And by the way, I think this is the reason why it's number one, I think this is a huge reason that separates us from a lot of our competitors, that ease of use. All right, case two. Now resources are going to be an essential function and act as the arms or client per se of GoAnywhere. There's over 20 different resource types to allow GoAnywhere to connect up to. Now these predefined connections for internal servers as well as external trading partners or locations make it really easy to build out these projects to manipulate and move files. You have things like, over here, your Amazon S3 buckets or Azure Blob Storage. These can facilitate cloud deployments or maybe just to offload archive backup data to cheap storage. We've also got things like popular database servers. Database servers, maybe you're querying customer database for information to put out into an Excel file, or vice versa. You're taking a CSV file or Excel file, reading it, and inserting it into a database. Your network locations, very common resource. This is going to define shares throughout your network for that automated file movement. Email servers, this could be whether you're leveraging an SFTP service, probably most commonly an Exchange server, to send out emails from GoAnywhere for alerting or maybe even secure mail functions, or maybe monitoring specific mailboxes for parsing out information for further processing. And then you have your file transfer servers like your FTP, FTPS, SFTP, AS2, HTTPS, all of those that you can set up once to define to have that help you with that automated movement. Now these are all defined once. If something changes, you change it at the resource level here. I think that's very important to point out, as maybe some of those folks on the attendance today dealt with those native scripts and you had certain resources that were doing FTP or FTPS and an IP address or username changed. That could be an absolute nightmare hunting down where those are actually used to change all those different locations where those scripts are at. Here, you just change it at the resource level, and if that resource is being used in 100 different projects, it'll trickle down and change for you. All right, moving on to number 3, translating data into different formats. Now this one, GoAnywhere Advanced Workflows, comes with 15 different tasks for data translations. Now these functions can allow you to read and write files into multiple different formats. Now, these here, if you're looking at a couple of examples, and we'll look through this in the Project Designer window, the read-write of CSV, Excel, fixed width, XML, JSON type files, reading in flat files, or maybe an example we'll look at, maybe a file isn't quite a file yet. We can do a SQL query to pull out information and then write it to a CSV or an Excel file or whatever format that you want it to do. Now, a lot of those things when we're pulling information out, we're going to put those into a row set. Now, row sets are going to be virtually what you're seeing in this picture over here. It'll be a big complex variable that will have different rows, columns, and all kinds of different information in it. The modify row set is maybe you want to parse out just a specific piece of that original row set that you pulled out. You can make that modify row set to do further processing with that modified row set that you just created. So a lot of different ways that you can translate information within these projects. All right, number 4. Automating file encryption, decryption. We see this one a lot. I think this one helps out a lot of things. I think it's a pretty straightforward, I don't want to belittle it, simple process, but when you take it out of the hands of your users, it really, really hits home and resonates with people to be able to do this automatically. So this makes you do this, automate that encryption and decryption process within your actual workflows. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with that PGP encryption process. Not so much the technical inner workings of it that's going on over here in this picture, but those folks that actually have to do that PGP encrypt, decrypt, or digitally signing, you know it's a bit tedious, not to mention if you administer more than one trading partner, you can definitely run the risk of choosing the wrong key. So these, having this automated from encryption, decryption, as well as your digital signatures and verification, all of this being done using the OpenPGP standard. I think this definitely helps going through and eliminating those potential errors if you're letting your actual users manage those PGP keys and actually applying them and sending them out. And we'll kind of show you how we can automate that. All right, case 5, create and use conditional statements. Now, conditional statements make for great job control throughout your projects. You can chain advanced workflow tasks together. Now, these tasks will perform the workflow runs and prior conditions are true. So in this case here, hopefully you can see that graphic decently here. But in this case, we're creating a file list, a couple different file lists. And I know you can't see the properties, but one's a local file list and one's a remote file list. So the very first thing we're looking at, our first if conditional, is a pretty basic one. And it's looking at that local create file list to see, are there any local files even there? If that's the case, then great. We're going to go through all these iterations of steps. Now, if there's no local files, then we'll just jump right out and go down to no local files to move. We'll send an email and say, hey, there's no local files to move. If so, this is where we kind of integrate our loops for that further job control, those conditional statements, leveraging that if-else logic within these for each loops to parse through these complex variables that we're creating here. Because creating a file list is going to create either 1, 5, 10, 100. We don't know how many files it's going to create when we're looking at a base directory. So it's going to parse through each individual file list to see if, in this case here, if the local file list, and again, this is going to be a colon name, which is an attribute of the actual variable, equals the remote file. So in this case, this customer wanted to compare the local file system to the remote file system. If there is an actual file that was already there, they wanted to rename it in a certain format and then do a SFTP put. And then a quick little email notification saying, hey, you know what, there was an actual file out there with the same name. We went ahead and reread it. If not, if this little if statement here, you'll see how they line up there. If it's not the same, then I'm just going to do a simple SFTP put file. So a lot of great granular control that you can use within these advanced workflows, and it's not anything too difficult, as you see the logic here. And you'll see when we get into the UI, makes it pretty straightforward to go through these projects to do your if-thens, your loops, and things like that, where, again, someone like myself who has no programming background, this stuff wasn't too hard to pick up on to actually do your own quote-unquote scripting through our advanced UI. All right, number 6, reference projects as common function or utilities. These projects you can create and be called by reference by multiple projects, meaning if I'm in a certain project, and we'll look at a couple when we get into the demo, and I get to a certain errors module, or I want to capture an error with an actual project, maybe that error is going to simply send out an email. In this case, in this actual project here, we're actually going to pass in some parameters as variables. We're actually going to make a SQL entry, and we'll look at this project when we get in there, and send out an email. Now, granted, you could do this within each individual project, but if it's going to be something that's common, and this is a pretty straightforward, simple example, but if it's going to be something that's commonly used or used over and over again, this is where we can use the call project task, which we'll take a look at within your projects, so that you don't have to do all of this within every single project. You can just say, hey, if there's an error, and we'll call an errors module, we're just going to use the call project task to call this common error project to do its thing, and then pass back control back to the original project. So a great place for you to do those common tasks. This one, again, seems very simple, but at some point, maybe you want to add to this error project. In that case, you do it right here. You don't have to do it through all the project that you're using. Let's move on. Number 7, run workflows in debug mode. Now here, we can run the advanced workflows in debug mode, meaning this allows for nice, easy troubleshooting of those individual projects. So we're going through, and I realize this graphic is a little light. We'll go through a debug mode when we get into the demo here. But in this case, we can go through step by step. And I know we haven't talked about the project outlines too much, but in a high sense, you're basically dragging in tasks sequentially. And it's just outlining the tasks, so they go one by one. And so how the debug is going to work, when we hit the next, it's going to go ahead and go each task at a time. As it does that, it's going to write out the job log, and it's going to be showing right here. We're also going to see the task that's currently been done, and then also the next task coming up. So when we hit next, the job log is going to fill out a little bit more information, and we also have a variables tab here, you'll notice, well, if you can see that. If there are any variables defined, whether they're user-defined or whether they're output from maybe a SQL task, you can also monitor step by step if those variables change to see what they change to, or if variables were added during each step. So it's a great way for you to go through on the debugging process if you do have problems within individual projects. And we'll kind of go through that here in just a little bit. Okay, so now the previous 7 use cases dealt with the concept of projects and all the elements, tasks, and resources that support their automated business functions. Now, the last 3 use cases, will deal with how projects are kicked off and to further expand the automated process. So here, this one specifically is talking about scheduling and automating GoAnywhere reports, but in essence, the scheduler is going to be one way that we can kick off projects. Again, this one's talking about automating reports so that you can send something maybe to your C-level staff or your sysadmins when projects fail, or you want to send an actual report. Maybe we have a system security audit report that goes through about 76 different settings within GoAnywhere to see if you are compliant as far as a security standard goes. We match those up to PCI DSS standards. That's something maybe you want to send to your CISO once a month or once a week. Those are one of the projects that you can send. Or maybe you want to send the recently blacklisted IP addresses to your security guy. In any case, these are things that you can generate these reports, deliver them, and send those email, text notifications to let them know they're there, and all from a scheduled basis. But it can be more than just the reports that we have on this page. The actual scheduler can go in and kick off any of these projects. We'll go through the scheduler window here when we actually get into the product and the demo. But this is one of the ways that we can kick off the actual projects that we build. All right, number 9, we've got our control data security with triggers. Now, triggers are completely based off of web user activity. I'll take a step back real quick. There's basically 2 users within GoAnywhere. We have administrative users, which are those folks that are going to log into the admin portal to do the configuration, installation, and things like that. A completely separate user is called a web user. And those users, not to be a misnomer with HTTP or HTTPS, but those web users are going to be the folks that you're creating to actually log into GoAnywhere to leverage whatever service you're offering, whether that is HTTPS web client, AS2, FTP, FTPS, SFTP, whatever that case may be. Any of those actions that they're doing when they upload a file, when they don't log in successfully, when their account gets disabled, login, download failed, things like that, those are going to kick off certain events. Now, these triggered events can cause responses like maybe just receiving an email when a file is uploaded by a trading partner. We'll kind of go through an example of that exact situation. Or maybe automatically removing a partial file from a folder if the file upload is unsuccessful. In any case, there's a lot of different actions that can be done based off of web user activity, depending upon how you set up the trigger. And we'll go through a trigger example here in just a few minutes. These triggers can automate those projects, send notifications based on user actions, GoAnywhere, and much, much more. All right, last but not least here, we've got our monitor files for determined events. Now this here, Advanced Workflows, can do file-based monitoring for certain events. In that bullet point here, the examples include monitoring for files that are created or modified, explicitly just created, explicitly just modified, whether they're deleted, or if they just flat out exist. So in here, again, the main point here is you're going to be monitoring a certain location, whether it's a local network share, or as you'll see when we get in there, you can also look at SFTP, FTPS, or FTP resources that you have access to. We can look at those folders. Again, we got recursive, whether the file exists, that's your event type here. And then kind of going through, you can use wildcard, or if you're regular expression or regex savvy, you can definitely choose a pattern type of regular expression. In any case, this is going to be your way of monitoring for those folders, any files that come in based upon your event type that you choose to go ahead and kick off a project. And we'll kind of take a look at that as well. So let's go ahead and jump in there. Let me get out of here and share my screen. And I'm hoping you guys can see my screen. First thing that we'll look at, we kind of talked about bullet point number 2, we talked about those resources. So before we jump into the projects and some of the examples, I think it's a really good idea to understand what I think is a very fundamental piece and very pivotal on how GoAnywhere does its automated file movement and manipulation. And that's going to be through our resources. Resources, again, as I briefly mentioned, this is going to be our way to like spider out and leverage other servers and services, whether on your local network or they could be off your network. In the case of maybe some FTP, FTPS, SFTP, different types of servers here. A lot of common ones, we talked about the Amazon S3 buckets and blob storage. Database servers is usually a pretty common resource that we connect up to. So what we're going to do is when you hit an add database, you'll have to provide the actual JDBC driver. Now we do load the common 2.0 drivers, so you'll find your driver in here, whatever that may be, and then provide the JDBC URL. Now if your DBA doesn't provide that for you, you can always hit the ellipsis, go through, find your MySQL, we'll put in my host, and database name, and if we hit generate URL, you'll notice that's exactly what that is. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that because I know this one works and make sure we don't break that. And then your DBA is probably going to give you a user account and password that he created when he created that database. The cool thing about the resources is you do have a test button here. Now this is going to do a couple things. One, it's going to test for that network connectivity to make sure that we can even get here. And then 2, if applicable, it's going to apply those user credentials that make sure we can connect. So when we hit the test button, okay, that connects up, and we got a great connection, and then went ahead and closed that connection out. As long as we get that resource test successful, then we're good to go. So now we've got the ability within GoAnywhere to connect up to the database to do either pulling information from it via select statements, or maybe we get information and that we want to do insert or update into here. We'll kind of take a peek at that. Another common one is kind of your SSH servers. In particular, SFTP is probably the one we see the most being used in the SSH servers. But having said that, we do see a lot of people doing SSH servers for kind of management of certain systems. But here, you're going to go ahead and put in your common information, host, port, username, and password. Now, if you are using a key, an SSH key, to actually connect up to that, then if your partner that you're connecting up to is requiring that, you can definitely put in your private SSH key to connect up to that individual server. Very important part that I want to point out on any of the kind of FTP or transfer type protocols is let's do our due diligence on the client side to make sure that we're ensuring as best we can a reliable delivery. And this is what we're going to do on the client side by setting your connection retries and retry intervals. So this, just in essence, if we are connecting up via SFTP as the client out to one of our partners, maybe their router reboots, or maybe they're doing maintenance and the server just reboots, or maybe it's something on your end. Whatever the case may be, whatever the network hiccup may be, at least we've got some retry attempts built into the client, so that if we are successful on our 5 retries, it will go ahead and pick up where it left off and not have to retransmit the entire file, not to mention successfully delivering the file. Now, granted, if all of these are exhausted, then we will have our error control through either the project where this SFTP server is being used, where we'll go through error modules, maybe an email or SMS notification, or any kind of SNMP traps that we need to. Again, here we can hit the test button to give our sanity check that makes sure that we can actually browse out to that directory. So we got the resource test successful. You'll see it does some listing out, 5 of 711 files, to make sure that we can actually browse out to that directory. One of the last ones I'll show you here, and I'll kind of move on from the resources, don't want to exhaust all the time here, But network shares is going to be definitely another one that people are commonly used. This is where, when files come in, or if you're monitoring for files, we need GoAnywhere to have access to those shares to even set those types of things up, whether it's a monitor, whether it's a trigger, whether it's just moving files to a final destination. This is where, from the network share standpoint, we can leverage any of the SMB protocols. You'll notice we got version 1. All versions supports 1, 2, 3, and 3.1.1. Native connections as well. So here you're going to do your client type, the host, and the actual share name. And then you're going to decide how you want to authenticate. Now, whether the user logged in credentials, what this would most likely be alluding to is if you installed GoAnywhere in the actual service, the GoAnywhere service that's running, maybe you set up a service account that's running as whatever the service account is called, and you give that service account access to multiple network locations where you could use here, or you could just browse via UNC path if it was a Windows service account. So here I'm connecting up as my user account, and here again we can do our test button to make sure that we can successfully connect up to this location here. So enough of the resources here. I think you guys get the point, but again, just to reiterate, this is where I am defining these one time. And now I can use these in multiple projects wherever. And if anything changes, I can just come here to the resource side, maybe my password changed, or on the SFTP server, the IP address changed. Whatever the case may be, I do it here, and it trickles down to all the projects. That's a really nice feature. I like the architecture of how the resources are very integral in how GoAnywhere flows. Okay, speaking of flows, let's go to workflows and projects. You'll notice a couple things. There's a few ways that you can segregate out who has access to what projects by top-level folders and domains. Domains is going to be kind of a way that we segregate out resources depending upon what your domain, what your user account has access to which domain, or you can do it on file permissions. So if you're on the Windows side, think of this as like NTFS permissions. You can actually lock it down on the folder level as well. In any case, let's go ahead and take a look at a really simple project here. This is going to be an SFTP put single file. Purpose of this one, I just kind of want to go over the project designer window. This was our number one use case, and this is, to me, I like this the best, and I think this is one of our biggest selling points, not to mention all the multitude of features, but this is the part that I really appreciated when I started here. This project designer window is broken up into 4 windows. The variables window is kind of hidden, but we'll pull that back out. The component library, like we quickly mentioned on that slide, we've got over 100 different individual tasks. We talked a little bit about data translation, reading and writing of certain files. The database task is very popular to do any kind of SQL statements. Your file transfer is going to be very popular as well, whether you're doing SFTP, any of the different file transfers. We talked a little bit about job control on your if-else statements as well as your loops to kind of really get granular and control that workflow in your business processes to do exactly what they need. And one of the other ones we did, I think that was on job control, the call project module, and we'll kind of talk about that. And that was the one where the example we used was to call a project that's doing a common function or a common utility. In our case, we're going to look at an errors module. So instead of these errors modules here doing all these different processes, we could simply just do the call project under the errors module, have it call that common errors module project, and then come back here. So a lot of different things we can do. In any case, when you decide what task you want to leverage within the component library, you can do your drag and drop, and that gets back to the drag and drop features we kind of talked about, or you could simply double click, and they'll end up here in your project outline window. This project outline window is pretty much just that. When you decide on the tasks you want, they're going to go in sequential order on down the line. If they are true or successful, it'll go down to the next one. The project or the attribute window here, this is going to be kind of your definition. So here we've got an SFTP put command. Now I need to know where's my source file, or maybe a source file is variable. Where is it going? Things like that. We're going to archive a file. What's the source file? Where's it going? So those are going to be how we're defining the task that we're choosing. And then the variables window will kind of pop that back out. You're going to have your pre-populated system variables. We'll look at some of the common ones, like when an error happens and you want to actually attach the job log. In this case here, you can attach the system job log, which you'll notice you can just, if you wanted to, you can just drag and drop to show you that drag and drop feature, and it automatically puts it into our variable use nomenclature or syntax, that $ curly brace, close curly brace. So you can leverage that drag and drop there. So that's kind of your 4 windows here. This particular project, just to go through really quick, is going to do a simple SFTP put, and that would just be here, hitting here, do the SFTP put. You would drag it right on in there. I won't put that one in there. We'll just leverage this one. So the first thing we do is, what SFTP server am I connecting up to? Well, I've got a drop-down list, and this drop-down list is being populated by the resources that we defined earlier. So again, it's really important to define those resources so we can leverage those in projects. Our send single file, we're just going to grab a single file. We're going to put it in a destination file, so you'll see we'll do some on-the-fly name change and actually leverage a current date timestamp variable, which you'll notice through our expression wizard. You can choose things like concatenation, trim, contains, anything like that. It's very granular on how you can manipulate the actual file names or parsing out file information. And here we're going to take and we're going to put the process source files variable into what we call source file. Now you'll notice that automatically gets added as an output variable. So in our next task, we're going to go and archive those process files. So for the source, I'm going to use source file. And again, just to kind of show you, we can drag and drop that right on in there. And then put it in this destination, this archive, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to go ahead and delete the original source files. So we're not processing those again. Now, if anything wrong goes within this task here, we've got an on-error call, which can do either abort by default. You can continue the call module, which is the one we're doing, or we can do a set var to actually give it a different value and then continue processing. So with this one, with our main module, we're calling the errors module, means any of these tasks go wrong, we're going to call the errors module, which is sending out an email, we're attaching the job log, and away it goes. Now we can also do this at the individual task level. And you'll see it here, I want to know if the SFTP server is the problem. So this one I'm actually going to call the SFTP error module, which is down here, which gets a little bit more granular, saying your SFTP task failed in project and leverage the variable called system job name. So pretty straightforward, and then we'll go through a couple scenarios here, but that kind of gives you the gist on the project designer window and what I think is pretty logical and intuitive on how to build out these projects. All right, let's go ahead and exit out of there. Now, that's building the actual projects, but how are we going to kick these off? So we briefly mentioned those last 8, 9, and 10 slides. We've got our enterprise scheduler here. I think we got one in here, webinar. We'll look at this one here. So this one here is going to go through, and you're going to select the project that you want to call. You're going to, you can give it a job queue if you want. We won't go into the job queue manager, but we do have a job queue manager. I can actually do priority on certain jobs if they're higher priority or lower priority. Important part here is your schedule. So you can do it very granular, 1 time, minute, hour, daily, weekly, monthly. But a few things to note, whether your start time, the days to run, looks like I'm just doing Monday, Tuesday, Friday for whatever reason. We do have a holiday calendar option as well. So you can define a holiday calendar. Once you define that calendar, that'll have the days where you guys are on holiday. And if that job falls on that particular day, you can say, hey, you know, do I want to skip it, previous day, next business day, or go ahead and just run it. One thing I do like to look at it as well on the scheduler is the repeat options. And this one's basically a schedule within a schedule. And one of the ones that I like the most here, just to kind of try and do your due diligence on making sure this gets kicked off, is your job fails. So if the job fails, I'm basically going to say, hey, let's repeat this job for 2 hours every 20 minutes. So it's basically just going to retry that at the 2-hour mark, or when it first fails, then 20 minutes later after that job is run, 20 minutes later, to try and do our best to get that project to kick off. Obviously, again, kind of like the SFTP connection, if it exhausts all its retries or that, then we're going to have some error notifications we can send out, and that's where our built-in email notifications come in. And here we'll talk about the project variables when we get to that other project here in just a second. All right, another way to kick off projects is through our monitors. And this is our file system monitoring. Here we'll look at one and the basic essence of this, and we're going to just look at a local network share. Remember, we can also look at FTP resources, whether FTP, FTPS, or SFTP. We're going to look at, looks like a Windows share on the folder's called Best Trading Partner. We're going to see just if the file exists. That's all I care about, and I'm doing a wildcard pattern of anything. So I don't care what file's in there. I just want to go ahead and look at this. The schedule here, you can say, hey, how often do I run, or what part of the day do I want to be running this? This one by default is all day. Checking every 15 seconds, well, just for demo purposes. We're going to use this one here in just a little bit. And then Monday through Friday. Whatever those files, or whenever you do get a hit from that folder location, you're going to call a project. Main thing is, whether it's 1, 5, 10, 100 files, doesn't matter. It's going to build that file list and put it into a placeholder or a variable called files. Now, this is by default. You can change the name, but just make sure that you call it by the right name when you call the actual project. It's PGP, then SFTP. And then a couple things, either file lock or secondary snapshots. This gives us the availability or ensure that files are not half written to or still being written to or being used by other OS processes. And then again, just like the scheduler, we have some email notifications whether project's successful or fails. And we'll take a look at that one in just a second. And then the triggers. Getting to the triggers, this is going to be where, and the one that I'm going to use is upload successful. And so basically with this here, we're going to say, hey, what service are we listening on? In my particular case, I'm just going to be listening on SFTP service, but you could say any service if you want. So the first condition is we have a file that uploads successfully via web user. Your second, third, fourth, and unlimited conditions can be on the conditions tab. I'm just choosing, hey, I want to know when web user D. Freeman uploads a file successfully via SFTP. You can do as many and or conditions as you want. I'm just going to keep it simple for this exercise. And all I'm going to do is send an email. I'm going to send an email to the Dan Freeman Help Systems account. So I'm going to say your file has arrived. You can go get your file from, and then we use a variable called event.username, which is synonymous with the web user. So it'll give the event user who actually uploaded the file. All right, so let's imagine that we currently have employees doing PGP encryption and FTP in files to clients on their desktops using FileZilla or another FTP client. Or maybe they're just emailing out with the hopes that they use whatever secure mail option and that they have by typing in a keyword in the subject line. Now, how are these files being generated? How do the employees know when they're ready to go? Are they managing PGP keys for each customer? Who's keeping the FTP clients up to date? Are they using regular FTP, FTPS, SFTP? And probably more importantly, who's training these employees using the FTP client or secure mail option and PGP encrypting files with appropriate public keys depending upon where the files are being sent? Now, I think these are all good questions when dealing with manual processes that involve a lot of moving parts. So what if we can automate this process, have it go through one medium and be able to track audit logs and generate detailed reports on what is going on throughout the entire process? It could probably reduce a lot of stress at both the management and employee level, not to mention whoever's in charge of maintaining compliance when dealing with these sensitive information. So let's take an example, and let's say you create folders for your employees for them to drop off files that need to be PGP encrypted and then sent via SFTP. So all they need to know is when they have to send the file securely to Best Trading Partner, in our example here, just drop the file off in the respective folder, and they're done. This can take a lot of responsibility out of your employees' hands as far as maintaining keys and FTP clients, not to mention get rid of a lot of points of contact for errors to happen. So here, let's go back to our monitor for our first example, and we'll go to that PGP SFTP. So in this one here, we're monitoring this Best Trading Partner, which is going to be right here, this individual folder location here. We're just looking for a file exists. We're not looking recursive, meaning anything on any folders underneath that folder, just for files. Any file that goes in there, we're going to look all day, every 15 seconds, Monday through Friday. We're going to kick off this PGP then SFTP project. So let's first, so we understand what's going on, let's go to that PGP then SFTP project. And this one's a pretty simple one. So one thing to introduce, the create and delete workspace, is basically creating a temporary location or folder location that actually gets the name of the unique job number that this job will create. And it's where you're keeping temporary files if you're doing a lot of different movements or manipulation of files. Keep them all there, and then the associated delete workspace to kind of clean up after yourself. In this case, here we've got input files variable. Now, in the first one we had just an input file, that SFTP individual file. This one's getting called from a monitor. So that monitor could pick up 1, 5, 10. We have no idea. So it's building that file list. So that's going to be the input to my PGP encrypt task. We're going to put the output into the system job workspace. So it'll be sitting out there, as well as a PGP files variable. So that on my SFTP task, one, I'm going to select the SFTP server first. But my put files, the source is going to be the output to that previous task. Now you'll notice that that got auto-created once I create it here, and we'll throw it in there. So we can add that. Destination directory, wherever you want it to be. Now we're actually going to archive the process files. So I'm going to take the original files that I got built from the monitor, and I'm actually going to throw these in an S3 bucket called Linoma Encrypted. And then I'm going to turn right around after that, and I'm going to delete the original files in that folder that we're monitoring so we don't reprocess the same files next time. So let's go ahead and let's drag a file right up in here, and hopefully this works. We'll just drag this here. The top 10 benefits of advanced workflows. This is on every 15 seconds. So to avoid the awkward silence here, hopefully this goes in about 10 seconds here. This is where the Jeopardy music would be good, or something. Okay, there it goes. So that shows that we deleted it in that step there. We SFTP'd it, and we can take a peek also. If I go out to my AWS, let's go to my S3 bucket. Let's go to that Linoma encrypted one, and the top 10 benefits, which just came out 1042, which is just now. So it archived that off to an S3 bucket. Now, granted, that's just a simple example, but to show you how you can have your employees just drop files off into a certain folder, and then they're done. Their hands are clean. They don't have to manage any PGP. It takes a lot of onus, and more importantly, it automates that process to where a lot of mistakes along the way can be avoided. Now, another thing that we can look at here, oh, and the other thing too, we also sent I believe, an email on the success of that. Look here, yep, monitor job completed successfully, and that was that built-in monitor or built-in email notification within that monitor. So we got our email notification as well. All right, now sometimes files aren't files quite yet for your employees to send. Now we can use the scheduler to kick off a project that's doing a SQL statement to pull data from a customer database, then PGP encrypt, and then SFTP out the door. So here, we can go to our scheduler, and we won't save that one. We'll go to, here's our webinar DB. So this schedule is going to call this DB to Excel to PGP to SFTP. Weekly, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off interactively. I'm not going to let the schedule kick it off, but you get the idea on how this would work. Email notifications. And with this particular example, we'll see that there's some user-defined variables that we could pass in at runtime. So if you wanted to change this from 25,000, we'll see what that is in minimum salary, you could change the effects of the results of the actual Excel file being generated, which we'll see in just a second here. So let's go to the project that this one's calling. And this one here. So this one, in a nutshell, looks a little bit more involved. But what we're doing is we're connecting up to a database resource. We're going to do a query for employee information. We're going to write that out to an Excel file. We're going to PGP encrypt it, and then SFTP it out the door. And then give me an email confirmation that, hey, everything went A-OK. So from that standpoint, we can go here. And within here, this is the SQL statement. We're going to connect up to the SQL database. Our query looks like we're pulling out some employee information. Now you'll notice we're going to leverage that user-defined variable that we created, where wages is greater than minimum salary, which we gave an initial value of $25,000. But again, that could be used as a parameter that you can pass in when you're actually kicking off this project. All this information that we're selecting is going to go into a placeholder or a row set. And we kind of talked about those row sets earlier. It's going to be that complex variable, all this information. Now, a quick conditional, just to kind of see, we've got a records found that we defined here of initially being true. But this is going to say, hey, by the way, when no data found, I'm going to do a set var to the records found equals false. So if nothing comes out of that select statement, it'll make it false. And this if conditional will not be true, and we're going to skip over all these steps and go ahead and abort out of the project. But we're going to say it's true, so we're going to create the Excel file. Again, the input is going to be the output from that SQL query. So we can just drag and drop that right in there. Create that Excel file. We can give it some sheet name, dress it up a little bit, employees, include the column headings, and down the line. And I think you guys kind of get the picture here, the PGP encrypt. We can add the public key. Whoever we're sending this out to is going to be the public key we're going to apply to that. Then we're going to SFTP it out the door using the output from the PGP encrypt step, and then email that information out. So here, if we kind of click on this, we'll run this interactively to kind of show you here. Looking at that job log, you'll go through and you see that you're doing your SQL task. Here's your query where wages equals, and we had that initial value of 25,000. Retrieving records, we're writing them out. Looks like we got 974 records, doing the Excel file, and on down the line. So you can see that job log will go through and show you exactly the steps that are going through, whether it was successful or whether it failed. So within here, just to kind of show you from a debug perspective, because we got a couple variables, so it'll be a good one to kind of show you. You'll see that the first task is going to be to create job workspace. So if we hit next, you'll see it says executing create workspace. Variables are still intact. Our user-defined variables are still intact. Let's go to next. This is going to connect up to the actual SQL box. It's going to do our query. And you'll notice now we did that query, the output, that my data row set variable got created. So you can kind of see and go through not only the log file to see what's going on in case there were errors, to exactly which step was happening, but also you can see the variables and how they're being affected when you go through the debug. All right, let's step out of here and let's act, maybe we're on the server side of things and want to be notified or kick off a project when files arrive from specific customers. This is where we'll talk about the triggers. Again, remember, these are going to be solely based on web user activity. So basically those folks that are logging into your system to leverage whatever service you're offering. So this webinar, or this trigger here, again, I'm doing SFTP only from D. Freeman web user account, and I'm just simply going to send an email. Now let me click this drop-down list. You'll see we can call a project, copy, delete, move, rename files, or maybe even execute a native command to do further processing. For this demo, I'm just going to do the send email. I'll say your file's arrived. You can go get your file from, and then leverage the actual event user name variable to say what web user actually sent me this file. So in this one, I'm going to go ahead and open up WinSCP, simulate a SFTP client connecting up to our server. And hopefully I remember the password. Okay, so you'll notice, let me click up the up arrow so you can see it. This is my trigger folder. That's the one I was looking for. And I'm going to go ahead and take this AS2 flow diagram.doc. Let's just throw it up there via SFTP. So now that trigger, all we had it set to do was send me an email saying, hey, everything just came up fine. So let's go to the email. And okay, there it is. Now it says your file has arrived. You can go get your file from D. Freeman, because D. Freeman was the web user account that uploaded that file. Okay, now the last one, kind of want to show you because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions here. Let me get rid of that one there. Wanted to kind of show you that common objects or common error projects in the utilities folder to illustrate how these can be used. So if we go to our projects, and let's go to the utilities folder, Here is that common error project, that screenshot that we had in the actual PowerPoint. But for this one, this is going to be a project that you could define. This could be one of your utilities. And this is, as the name suggests, a common error project. So instead of, if you remember looking at all those projects that I had error modules that were doing send email, doing all the things that we were doing. Now, that seems like, you know, something very simple, but maybe we want to pass in parameters, and maybe we also want to enter it into a SQL database to keep record of when things fail, and then also send an email out to whoever it is. So for this illustration here, what I'm doing, I'm just going to run this interactively, which is not an exact demo or a use case, but think of this as another separate project was running, and kind of look at it this way. Let me go to a different project here. You just go to the monitors, and yeah, this one. Instead of, actually not that one, instead of having all those steps within there with your errors modules or the problems module and all this send, we could just leverage the call project, and we'll drag that right up here. We can delete all this send email, and if there was a SQL query task, we could just call the project, call that common errors project, run in the same project to pass in the user variables, and those user variables are going to simulate, well, what I'm simulating here is going to be these user-defined variables here. So we're just doing from email address to subject message. So in this case, I'm just going to do a SQL, connect up to my database, and I'm doing an insert into that database all this information, and then I'm going to send an email out to whoever it was from, and then also the to, and all the other variables that we had defined. So just executing this, you'll notice, and hopefully here, it should have the new one in there. Yep, so there we go. We got the webinars are awesome, except if you're the one doing them. I don't know who said that. They're actually really fun to do. But in any case, you can throw that into a database entry as well as get your email, which we should have got. Yep, there we go. Webinars are awesome unless you're the one doing them. So you can do a multitude of things with those common projects so that you don't have to change them or even create them within each individual project, kind of like resources. Think of it that way, those utility projects. All right, well, everything that we kind of went over, just a few examples of how GoAnywhere can help you achieve that automation and reap the benefits of efficiency, accuracy, cost savings, and much more, all the things that we kind of talked about in the beginning. And now, I think we got about 7-ish minutes left. I'll take a breath here, see if there's any questions to ask, and I'll pull up my panel here. Maybe. Oh, I got to stop sharing here. Oh, there's a lot of them. I don't know, Brian, if you were answering these or not. Kind of going through these. Can it connect to Dropbox? Natively, not right now. One of the things, I guess, not to do a sales pitch so much, but one of the things that we have within our HTTPS listener is called GoDrive. It is a file collaboration type utility. It is all on-prem of a directory of your choosing. Key thing is, for me, the key thing is from a security perspective, you have complete control of who has access to it, who's modifying files, when files are leaving or coming into the organization, and everything within the GoDrive directory is AES 256-bit encrypted at rest. So it's a nice tool. You can do a lot of the revision history, trash bin, share files out or folders out to folks, so you can do that read writing back and forth. We actually have a client on the desktop that will map a local drive to it, and bidirectional syncing. You can have offline access as well as a mobile client on your Android and I'm drawing a blank, Apple devices. I don't know if there's one on the Windows, but to answer your question, we don't have the native connectivity to Dropbox. Let's go back in here. Let me go back up here. One question that did come in also, how are you managing PGP keys? To go back into here, let me show that real quick. Let me share my screen out again really fast. One thing I didn't mention that's a good point. We are a full-blown key management system. We do have a database-driven KMS. So within here, you can manage your PGP keys here. So if you guys are getting public keys from certain folks because they're requiring you to PGP encrypt files, then great. You can go ahead and put those in, import those in here. Or you can add key pairs for yourself if you want your partners to encrypt things via PGP to send to you for you to decrypt, or the digital signature and verification in any case, whatever way you go. So this is definitely a place in GoAnywhere in that KMS where you can manage not only PGP keys, but also your SSL certificates and SSH keys. Good question. Let me go stop sharing here. I don't see it. That's not what I do. And not hear anything. Okay. Another one that did come in, must be from a security guy. Wanted to see a little bit because I mentioned the system security audit report, kind of on that automated scheduled basis. That is one of the canned reports within here. You can run this ad hoc like I'm doing right now, or you can put that on a scheduled basis. So this will go through about 76 different security controls within the GoAnywhere product. It'll tell you whether you pass or fail. If you fail, now forgive us, this is our demo box, so there's a lot of failures. But if you do fail, it's going to go ahead and give you the mitigation steps or recommendations and then match it up to, and we chose PCI DSS just because it is worldwide. I think I'd like to look to add the NIST 853 or the NIST 800-171 documents as a column here too, to kind of, for those folks that have to go through those regulations, this is really nice to be able to print out to your auditor to kind of take a peek at this, and not to mention a sanity check for your security guys to see that at least the GoAnywhere portion of your system, your total system that's in scope, is up to snuff. I thought I just saw another one come in here. Hold on. Somebody looks like they like the I Love Lucy. That's encouraging to hear. How will we get the public key, private key? Thanks. Okay, yeah. So this looks like the same, virtually the same question. I mentioned about the PGP encrypt, add public key. How, where could you get the public key? Well, the public keys are going to be, depending upon if it's from your partner, they're obviously going to email it to you, or I don't know how you're going to get that, depending upon your medium on getting it. But if it's you creating the actual key pair within PGP, that's as simple as going to the Manage PGP Keys, Add Key Pair. You'll go through this. By default, we have RSA. You can choose Diffie-Hellman if you want. 2048, at least the minimum decent size. Put in your password. Once you create that, hit OK. You'll have your key pair, and then you can do your export, the actual key pair, which I highly don't recommend because that's going to have your private key unless you're transferring between internal systems. But this is where you can hit that public key pair and throw that ASC file out to somebody if you wanted them to use that to encrypt files to send to you, either way. But yeah, you can do full management, public, private key right from our KMS here. I hope that answered that question. Users can view the DB tables and view their structure. Yeah, so when you go through the question using database resource, can we view the DB tables and view their structure? There's a SQL wizard. When you go through, let me grab a project here for, where was I at here? Webinar, let's go to DB, and hopefully this resolves here quick. On the query stage here, I'm going to move this window over here. And let me get some more real estate over here. All right, that's not what I wanted. Go away. This little ellipsis here can take you out to, it might take a second here in the conference room, but this little browse button here will take you to the actual SQL tables. You can select the tables that you want, and basically it builds out the SQL statement or select statement or whatever it is that you want to do for you if you're not SQL savvy. But yeah, it will show you the tables, I promise you. I don't know if it's behind a window right now. You can always go to Tools and SQL Wizard as well and connect up to the database resources that you have. I think this one's operational. Connect up to these, and it'll basically do the same thing. So it'll give you your schemas, tables, columns, column headings, and yeah, once you start selecting them and hitting tables, columns, it'll start building out your SQL statement for you.
So thanks everyone for your questions. If you did have a question we weren't able to answer, there will be a survey that pops up right after this wraps up, and you can put your question there and we will do our best to get back to you. Since we are at the top of the hour, we can probably go ahead and wrap this up. But I do want to let you know, if you're new to GoAnywhere, we have a free 30-day trial on our website, and we'll show you the link to that in just a sec here. Feel free to go to our website and try out advanced workflows for yourself. And if you're already using GoAnywhere and you want to add advanced workflows to your environment, feel free to contact us at the email or phone number on the screen. We're happy to help. And then again, any other questions, just make note of that in the post-webinar survey, and we will be happy to get back to you. So thank you, Dan, for walking us through this today. Thank you all for joining. I hope this was helpful, and let us know if there's anything else we can do for you. We are happy to help. So have a great day.
Yep. Thanks, guys.